to explain that how this assassins were doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
And they have made a list. And this list was provided to them by an agent within the Iraqi Ministry of Defense. And at the time, we couldn't understand that every day that I was working undercover in the Iraqi MOD, pilots would leave. The MOD would not come back. Perhaps it got weird to a point that I see many Iraqi officers die every single day. But the weird thing about it that I was seeing more pilots die every single day.
Yeah.
And more pilots, the more pilots leave the wire, they don't come back. And clearly we knew at that time, the U.S. intelligence were aware that there's some kind of a focus on Air Force pilots.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out what the common thing was with the killing. We have people getting assassinated by different terrorist organizations, but why pilots in particular are leaving the wire and not coming back?
Right. Meaning
that you have 4 pilots leave the wire from the Iraqi MOD, barely hired, just came back to the new Iraqi military, and all of a sudden you hear that 3 of them were assassinated. And obviously the 4th one is going to lose interest. It's just not going to come back. It's going to get scared. So at the time that we were trying to figure out who is really providing this information, we were navigating at that point that we don't know this Iraqi general was providing all this information. We're basically navigating who is in the inside. That's where I was working, right in there, trying to figure out the ocean under the iceberg.
Yeah.
Who's really providing this intelligence? Who's really doing what they're not supposed to do? So we went into depth into searching. So at the time, the orders were actually figure out who these pilots are, what they have done in the past. So we figured out that the common thing was some of these pilots, majority of them, had conducted airstrike in Iran. And at the time, I was doing favors for returns at the time as an intelligence asset. My biggest thing that I have talked about in the past was actually U.S. medication or giving you treatment at a U.S. hospital. And the reason why, when people get injured in Iraq, if they go to an Iraqi hospital, most likely they can give you a shot and kill you right in there if they knew you're part of the military.
Right.
Or terrorists could still have access to you. It means that if they try to assassinate you and somehow you didn't die, they can still come to the hospital and finish you off.
Yeah, so the hospital's not secure or safe.
Not secure at all. So the biggest thing that I was offering as an intelligence asset at the time was actually treatment at a U.S. combat hospital.
So you help me, I get you an American hospital.
I get you in an American hospital. And that was my basically my currency at the time in exchange for street level intelligence. And at the time that I was not focusing on that topic because I had bigger fish to fry. I had bigger people that I was looking at, bigger people to collect on. So it was not really much, there was not much information to know why and where these assassins are coming from. We had absolutely no idea where these Iranian assassins coming from, who is helping them, where are they located in Baghdad? We don't know.
Wow.
And one day we have an Iraqi pilot in the Iraqi MOD who has a brother who's also another Iraqi officer who was not a pilot. And I'm sitting in my office and the Iraqi pilot, the brother of the Iraqi pilot, is knocking on my door. So I opened the door and he said, my brother was detained by Iraqi commandos, which basically Iraqi police force. This is like the raid force for the Iraqi police.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, what did your brother do? And he said, that's the thing. We went to every Iraqi police station and we can't find my brother. So we don't know who these commandos are. So when he said that, they immediately knew that the people that actually kidnapped his brother were the Ministry of Interior. However, it was not a regular Ministry of Interior people. These happened to be some secretive force of their Ministry of Interior. So they went to the Iraqi Minister of Defense and they pressured him to make a phone call to the Iraqi Minister of Interior, who was known at the time as the drill man. He was an Iranian guy who fought with Iran. He's an Iranian agent. Everybody knew this guy was a member of the Badr Corps, which is Iran's most loyalist. And they immediately assigned this guy as the Minister of Interior. So
now, are you talking about the same drill man?
Yeah.
That was in a couple different movies.
Yeah.
He's famous, right? Like for torturing people with an electric drill?
Extremely famous. So he was the only guy known in Iraq as a drill man. This
Wow.
guy wasn't really just a random terrorist. This guy was a very big time terrorist and a very accomplished person. He was the Minister of Interior. He was in charge of every single commando and Iraqi police officer in the country.
So this was a very wealthy man too, right?
Very extremely wealthy right now.
So he's just pure evil because he doesn't need to be there. He's
Yeah. So he comes in, and this Iraqi officers are freaking out that his brother has been taken by an unknown force. So they forced the Iraqi Minister of Defense to actually pick up the phone and call the Iraqi Minister of Interior, who's an Iranian agent. Call him and say, I need this guy out. So the Minister of Interior, which is the Iranian agent, hangs the phone and says, I'll find out if we have him. We don't know if we have him. Goes back and calls the Iraqi Minister of Defense and says, I don't think your brother, the guy you're looking for, is alive, because he's been taken by a force that are higher than me. I mean, look, when an Iranian agent tells you this Iraqi pilot has been taken by a force that are higher than me, I can't not ask them to do things. So the Iraqi Minister of Defense says, okay, we'll pick up the body at this point. So they make an arrangement where people will go with a convoy to the certain gate of the Iraqi Ministry of Interior. And somehow we were going to go there and pick up a body. That's where the U.S. intelligence immediately jumped on it. And I was told to go and be right there and find out who is it inside of the Iraqi Ministry of Interior. Who is it behind these assassination lists? Who are the assassination teams? So I immediately exchanged a deal with the brother that if he lets me in to go be part of that convoy, and he has to choose me to go among the 4 people who are allowed to go inside of that compound. And if he does that, we were going to save his brother if his brother is alive. We were going to take his brother to a U.S. combat hospital, and there might be a small percentage where his brother can live. So the brother takes the deal. I go there. I get in the car. We get to the gate, and they said, we're only allowing 4 people in. Obviously, I am the youngest, most youngest looking person. I am the most innocent looking guy in the crew. The 3 Iraqi officers who escorted me, they were actually a lot older.
Yeah, I seen your pictures from back then. You're kind of like a skinny little guy.
This teeny little guy. No one would even look at. So I do look like actually I'm about to carry a body. That's what I look like I was about to do. And I get into the car and I go inside. And once I went inside of the Iraqi Ministry of Interior, as soon as they opened the gate, it was actually a small compound isolated from the rest of the Ministry of Interior. A place that you didn't know it exists. It sits right behind 10-foot concrete barriers.
Like a black site.
It is like a black site. And they opened the door, and the people were dressed in Iraqi commando uniform. They were wearing a green camouflage. And I still remember as the car went down, there was buildings on the left-hand side of the road. And in top of the building, there were people with PKCs pointed right at the car.
Wow.
And you're looking up and you see people with putting the barrel right on the car. You almost felt that they were going to open fire on the car. So we get out, we go to a front headquarters, which we saw a building. We get out, and at the time I'm wearing glasses that had a camera in it. And I get out of the car, and I will never forget, the first person shows up was an Iranian agent known by General Faris, who was actually known as General Faris as an Iraqi general, but he's not. He's also an Iranian agent.
Wow.
Speaks fluent Arabic because he's from the Iranian-Iraqi borders. Comes out. So at that point, I'm confused. I'm looking at people who are in Iraqi uniform, but some of them are speaking Persian to one another. And he comes out first.
And Persian is primarily spoken where?
In Iran.
Okay.
These are totally not Iraqis, man.
Wow.
They might be, some of them are Iraqis, but they kind of have Iraqi Iranians.
So this would be like seeing an American soldiers in uniform and they're speaking Spanish.
In Spanish.
What is going on?
And you're like, what's going on in here? And literally, I was confused. And as he came out, there was a person that came out from behind him. And immediately, 4 soldiers comes out carrying a blanket and you can see there's someone in the blanket. And the one thing that I saw was blood dripping from the blanket as the blanket was getting closer to us. And as soon as they brought the blanket, I look to the right side and I see somebody who believed to be the Quds commander of Iran behind that Iraqi general, who also another Iranian agent. In that moment, someone hit me with the back of my head with the barrel. I felt the barrel was hitting me in the head. And the person said to me, "Look down." And I immediately took that look and I looked down and I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't see." He said, "Keep looking down."
Wow.
And when they came by us, they actually threw the body in the ground, in the blanket.
Just tossed him
right in front of us. And they literally looked at us and said, "Put him in the car and get out of here and do not look." And I literally went down, carried him, put him in the back of the car. There was no time to look at him. There was no time to know if he's dead or alive. All I see is a blanket that is dripping blood coming down as they walk towards us. So we put him in the car. And as soon as we put him in the car, we get into the car, we start driving away. And as soon as that gate opened and we left, I immediately jumped to the backseat and I was trying to see where he was injured. Was he shot to the body? There's any wounds we can treat while we can get him to the hospital. Mm-hmm. And at the time he was shaking. So he was still alive.
Oh, he was still alive.
He was still alive.
Wow.
I can see he's shaking. I can see there's hand movement. I have checked for heart rates. But one thing that I didn't understand, there was blood all over his face.
Yeah.
But I can't find where the wounds were.
Mm.
I thought he was shot to the head. So I couldn't see any wounds around the face, around the neck. And I started actually seeing that the blood was actually coming from his hair. So I started putting my fingers in between his hair. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I put my fingers in between his hair, I technically had his skull in my hand. And what I felt, there were holes in his head.
Holes from like a bullet or?
It's what I thought. It wasn't a bullet. I felt there was small holes in his head, and I just kind of figured in my head, like, was this guy really shot to the head and he's just still alive? No, it wasn't. They were actually drilling into his head with a drill.
Yeah, because if you got shot in the head 6 times, you're not going to have you have no head left. Yeah, there's nothing left.
So that's the thing is you didn't know what they used to torture him. So you're actually feeling there's holes in the head.
Wow.
He's still alive. I'm confused. And I see that he's bleeding still. And he's not well. Mm-hmm. So I immediately make a phone call. We get him a helicopter to land, put him on a helicopter, fly him to Ibn Sina Hospital, U.S. Combat Hospital in the Green Zone. At that point, he was separated from his brother, from everybody else in that convoy. It was just me and him. I land him down, and I will never forget the doctors who came in at the U.S. Combat Hospital to see this. And they're just like, what is this? Someone who has been drilled to the head 6 times by a drill. Mm-hmm. And at that point was, for us, for the U.S. intelligence, we were trying to figure out why this person was tortured and what kind of questions he was asked and why were they trying to kill him. So they immediately put him on another helicopter and they flew him to Balad, where people do neurology into his head. They can look into the head. So I didn't see the guy until about 3 months later. And I'm standing there in the MOD and all of a sudden, I see the guy comes in and immediately the American agent calls me and says, we're going to interview this guy. So I go there to sit with him and talk to him. And I said, hey, man, why were you taken? What questions do you remember after everything you went through, after they drilled into your head? Do you really remember what you have done? And he said, they asked me about a person who was in my squadron back in the 80s. And he happened to live in southeastern Baghdad. And he goes, I switched squadron. I've never seen this guy again. He said, they drilled into my head asking me where that guy is.
So just somebody that he went to school with.
So basically the information was provided is that someone in his squadron has bombed somebody in Iran.
Wow.
And that he was not the guy who was wanted, but they found out who was in his squadron, and there was a way for him to tell them where that guy is now. You're talking about this pilot. It's probably a civilian. He's probably living somewhere in Iraq, right?
Yeah.
Probably not living where his family is living, could be living somewhere else. But they were basically torturing people in that squadron
just to get to that pilot.
To that one guy.
Wow.
And it just goes to show you what Iran was pushing way too far in that war, that they were looking to do anything they can to get the information to assassinate. So they assassinated over 168 Iraqi pilots.
Did you ever wind up prosecuting the what did you say, Lieutenant Colonel, who was the traitor?
Oh, the Iraqi general?
Yeah.
No, man. So nobody was able to prosecute him. He was protected. Later on, when the U.S. troops pulled out of Iraq, Prime Minister of al-Maliki appointed this guy to be one of the top people.
So you think he's still alive today?
He's alive and still. He's paralyzed. He can only move his eyes.
How would he be paralyzed?
He's paralyzed. He got sick.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I guess there is some karma then.
It is. He got sick and he can only move his eyes.
Wow.
And that's what I heard last about him. I mean, literally, this guy has, just to go through the stories, man, this guy has eliminated every single person that would become in any kind of competition within the Iraqi government or the Iraqi Ministry of Defense. He will eliminate it like it's nothing happened.
Incredible. 2
people who try to take his positions or were appointed by the Iraqi or the U.S. government to take his positions were immediately assassinated. 2 people, not one. Wow. So he always left you with no options. And the fact that he wasn't alone, he had a group outside of the Iraqi Ministry of Defense he met with, and a lot of these operatives worked in the MOD as well.
Yeah.
So he wasn't only doing it in his own position, other people in other positions, important positions, were also getting assassinated. So his guy could be the next guy.
So what I'm taking from all of this that you just said, Muhammad, who we're speaking to today, is extremely fortunate to be alive.
He could have been one of the 168 pilots that were assassinated by Iran.